The best talent gets the most from AI. I was just talking to a musician, and he was saying that the best talent sees things in the AI music making process that the average talent doesn't. We see that in coding. The best engineering talent is able to do the most with these platforms. Everybody has the same access to the same capability, but the best coding engineer gets the most value from that platform.
Hello, welcome to The Most Interesting Thing in AI from Rethink, the Atlantic's creative marketing studio, in collaboration with PwC, a leader in helping organizations use AI. Today, I want to take a minute to talk about a technology that has changed everything about our lives. And that technology is the light bulb. I don't need to make the case for why light bulbs are important, but interestingly, it wasn't always obvious. The light bulb was patented in 1880, but 20 years afterwards, only 3% of American homes had electric lighting. You can imagine a conversation back then with two people arguing on a street corner. These things are useless. They're kind of dim. They burn out on purpose. You can carry a candle with you from one room to the next. If you had started a business to try to capitalize on the early excitement about light bulbs, you would probably have had to have waited for 40 years for it to become truly successful. And I bring this up today because we're kind of maybe in the same moment with AI. Like the light bulb, it exists, it works, and yet a lot of businesses aren't really using it yet. They're still running on the equivalent of steam and water. So to help understand why that's the case, I sat down with a man whose job it is to get businesses onto the next technological step. His name is Dan Priest, and he's the Chief AI Officer at PwC. I've had Dan on the show before in December of 2024. A lot has changed since then. And so I wanted to talk to him about that and everything that's coming next. Here's my conversation with Dan Priest. Welcome back to The Most Interesting Thing in AI.
It's great to be back.
I'm delighted you're here again. And I want to start with, you work with a lot of different companies. You advise them on AI. Since we last talked, which was 18 months ago, what is the craziest thing you've seen happen at one of the companies you work with?
Crazy good or
Either way, this is the beginning. If you tell me something terrible, I'll ask you later for something good. If you tell me something good, I'll ask you for something terrible. So choose whatever you want.
There's a few things. The extremes are always kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And so we've had clients who have been extremely aggressive about what they think AI will do for them in terms of headcount reductions. And they have expectations, they have investments that they want an ROI on. And we tend to talk them back from the extremes for
Wait,
lots
they're like
of
super
reasons.
reckless. They're like, we're going to lay off 10% of our employees and replace them with AI. And you're like,
Or
"Nah,"
more.
or
Yes.
more.
And it's not necessarily lay them off, like fire them. It could be that they think they're going to grow the business and redeploy them. But like crazy aggressive ambitions around AI need to be tempered with the reality that it takes a lot of human talent. It takes a lot of technical maturity. It takes a lot of things that will pace how much you can achieve with AI. So it's much more a game of focus. And then on the other end of the extreme, you have companies who will talk themselves out of any benefit of AI, which I find crazy in this day and age too.
What do you mean talk themselves out of any benefit?
That
Like, we
their
can't do it for
business
this,
is,
we can't do it for this, for that
yeah,
reason, we can't do it.
that their business is somehow immune from AI. Whether, and I've seen examples like this in healthcare, I've seen examples like this in manufacturing, industrial companies, and you start talking about what AI is good at and proven use cases, and you get to a more reasonable place. But in the beginning, oftentimes, you start at the extremes.
All right, well, let's talk about disruption due to AI. So when you were on last December, I asked you when we would see a company with 1,000 people getting disrupted by an AI native startup of 10 people. And to your credit, you didn't give me an exact date. So I can't say, Dan, you said it would be in 18 months. Here we are. But you said it was on the horizon.
Yeah.
Where do you think we are now?
I've evolved my thinking a little bit in that you hear about that $1 billion company run by one person and all agents, right? I have a hard time seeing a path to achieving that. if for no other reason than the accountabilities. That it's really hard for one person to see everything across their business, all the controls that are required to do business responsibly, and have one person accountable. You typically want altitudes of accountability, and organizations grow around those accountabilities. And I think that is still a really important objective, a really important guiding principle for businesses. Do it responsibly, put the guardrails in place, build human accountability around this AI, and that automatically starts to limit how far or how fast that billion-dollar one-person company can
All right,
be
so a
achieved.
couple of hypotheses about why implementation is going slowly. One is we're on a J curve, right? And it's hard to implement AI at first, and you introduce some slop, structures change, it's confusing, and then whoosh, shoot right up. Another is that like the percentage of things that AI is genuinely useful for once you get into an actual transformation is kind of low, right? It's an amazing tool, it can make certain things go fast, but every task and every job has all these other elements where you don't change the speed. What is your hypothesis for why there's such a gap between improvements in the abilities of AI and the effect it's having on the economy?
So I think you framed it just right. The technology is innovating and maturing much faster than it's being adopted.
Yeah.
And so then it leads you to a sort of human based hypothesis, right? So if the technology is good and getting better, not perfect, not perfect,
Definitely not perfect.
but good and getting better,
Yep.
I think adoption and AI value realization will move at the speed of trust. And if you look at, there's a great Stanford study out there that showed, who trusts AI. And it's basically a survey of, is AI on balance better or worse for humanity? And in China, there's an 80% trust rate. In UAE, 80% trust. Emerging markets, very high trust rates. In the US, that trust rate's about 40%. So there's a fundamental difference in how much we trust AI, and therefore adoption is lower.
Let me run a theory by you. AI is generally used for the front office because that's where the excitement is, it makes the board happy, makes the CEO look good. But really, what it's good for is the back office. And that's where you get many more efficiencies and you don't have the risk of AI touching customers and screwing stuff up. And if AI messes something up in the back office, you just have a system that catches it and fixes it, right? What do you think of that theory?
It's a little different than the pattern I've seen. The number one most industrialized use case is code generation. That's back office. Technology delivery is squarely in the back office. And the results have been exceedingly good. We have a bunch of published case studies, one of which is Southwest Airlines, where even in the design phase, not even getting into code generation, even in the design phase, we took 50% of the time and effort out of getting to an approved design. And then when you get into code generation, you see 30, 40, 50% benefits. It's definitely in the back. It started in the back office, and what we're also interestingly seeing is developers are not getting laid off. Like
That is interesting.
the number of recruiting, the number of recs for developers is going up.
But it's also interesting, the number of people studying CS in college is going way down. Like people are worried about what's going to happen, but the job market has been great.
But all of that is a reaction, and we're trying to, you making predictions is inherently hard. But we saw it sort of went tech delivery in the IT shop, then it jumped to the front office into customer service,
Yep.
and then back into the back office around CFO, CHRO. It's basically, where are teams getting benefits from AI? And so every single one of those areas, there are proven case studies where others have gotten benefits. And then most companies are chasing table stakes, right? They're just trying to keep pace with table stakes. So they're
Yeah.
they're moving from back office to front office to middle office. Middle office is probably the least penetrated
Right.
in my experience. but it's not exclusively the front office.
And how are you seeing org structures change? Like, there's this conversation about, I don't know, product managers, engineers, and designers, right? And product managers can do a little bit of engineering, engineers can do a little bit of product, everybody can do a little bit of design, design can do some of both. One hypothesis, it's all going to flatten, right? It's just going to be people who are, really good at using these tools, who can pick up the skills they don't have and turn themselves into a one-person team, right? Another theory is that actually, like, one of these particular skills is most important, actually, right? If you can manage a good team of agents, like, you're really set. What do you think it is?
The trend towards specialization has been strong and
Yeah.
unmistakable for a few decades now, and we see it in the C-suite.
Yep.
Um, I think there's still a role for the specialist,
Mm-hmm.
but to your point, I think there's also a role for the generalist that can work across
Yep.
specialties. I don't know that it eliminates. It's probably
Mm-hmm.
right. It's I'm going to have a generalist who can look across these specialties and who's really good at innovation.
Yep.
And you think about how a generalist solves problems. A generalist solves problems using first principles thinking, the hypothesis driven approach, the scientific method, right? They experiment because they've never seen this problem before. So they've got to figure out
Yeah.
a never before solved problem, right? A specialist solves problems differently. They say, I've seen this problem, I've seen it many times before, I know exactly how to solve it. And they keep getting better and better at solving it smarter, faster, right? And I think both of those still have a place, but we don't have enough innovators right
Mm-hmm.
now. So to your point, I do think that skill set, that generalist skill set that looks across specialties, that leverages agents who are highly specialized, will rise in importance.
How should companies be thinking about deploying agents? Do you have a general philosophy about how companies should and how managers and how individuals should use agents? Should agents be put into Workday? Should everybody be trusted to use their own agent? Should each employee have one agent? Like, what do you recommend?
So the each employee having their own agent is going to happen, right? Like just general productivity reasons. They're going to start to get to know the human and what they do every day, and help them read emails, create memos, whatever. Like they
Do you have
do
do you have one
analytics.
custom Dan Priest agent?
I don't have one, but I have agents that I go back to routinely. We have a GPT that's everybody can use that, it shows up on all of our desktops
Yeah.
now that we use to create PowerPoint slides.
And what is better about it than just like, hey, you are a great PowerPoint presenter? Like, how is it better than because it's got the whole history of all the PowerPoints you've made and the feedback?
Not only that, but it shows up with the latest standards in terms of branding,
Yeah.
has the latest content. So my team works a lot with companies to shape the thinking around how do you transform with AI.
Hmm.
So we do a lot of work with clients. That's not true. I mean, on the topic of AI transformation, we probably do 10x what any other individual team does in PwC. We make sure that all of our learnings from that volume of work that we're doing shows up in a GPT that every single person can use on their project or their pursuit.
Wait, so you're taking all that you learn and all of your conversations about transformation and you're feeding that back into a system that everybody at PwC can learn for both improving PwC, but for also for their tracks of work.
Exactly.
That's a good way to do it.
It's leveraging the expertise that would have otherwise been resident and exclusive for a very small team
Yeah.
and making it available to everyone.
Wow, you're going to make it a lot easier to replace Dan Priest.
I hope so.
All right, let's go back to your agents for a second. Do you use multiple large language models or do you use just
Yes.
one? You use
No, many.
And do you use many because biases can seep into different agents and you like to sort of shift between them?
Yes. And I pay attention to model metrics a lot. And so everything from model accuracy to latency to drift, hallucinations, deception rates, task lengths, I pay attention to them. And you do get different results with different models.
Yeah.
And you can check, do it, that the whole concept of a multi-agent team is you create checks and balances,
Mhm.
and you can use multiple models to help with that.
But okay, this is what I don't get. And when you register an agent, it's just whatever model you put it on, right? Let's say you're using Anthropic, you put it on Haiku, you put it on Sonnet, you put it on Opus, or whatever you put it on. It's just the model and then your prompt. I mean, with humans, they have different capabilities. They have different breakfasts. They get good night's sleep. They perform differently. They have different attitudes, things we don't know. Like, why would an agent perform badly? That's the problem with the task. It's the imbalance between the task and the abilities of the model. It's not the agent's fault.
Well, I'm not trying to assign
I
blame,
feel,
but
I feel like you're treating your agents badly, Dan. And I like my umbrage. I feel like I'm defending the rights of your agents.
uh, agents still have a ways to go in terms of consistently performing, especially long task cycles.
Yeah.
And so, a couple of things that you said. One is there's an abstraction above any one model, right? Where you've got we said that we use multiple models, right? There's an abstraction layer above that where within a company behind your firewall, you do have, we call it an operating system, but you have a way to manage all those agents. And the agents will come from multiple platforms, right? And what we saw, like one of the RPA lessons, robotic process automation lessons that we learned was there was a proliferation of bots. People started losing track of bots, right? And so you needed some controls in place to
Yeah.
keep track of them. The ability to register an agent against a task affiliated with a user with an expected outcome helps you manage the performance of those agents. Then on the individual performance of the agents, they're imperfect, right? And they do get it wrong. And the accuracy rates are 85, 90 something percent. The longer the task. So say for instance, you said, hey, I'm gonna go to bed. And when I wake up, I want you have to, to have run the analytics against these data sets, and I want you to create these slides, testing these hypotheses, right? Right now, the task length for something like that is probably like 2.5 hours.
Right.
And so if you went to bed and you gave a task that required 8 hours of concentration, that agent is showing up on average across models with about 2.5 hours of concentration. That means their success rate is dipping below 50%.
I often wake up. I always run agents through the night, and I often wake up to see what they've done, and sometimes it's just maddening. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, how did you end up in this loop? And I know it's my fault.
If you were tasking it for coding, which is much more structured and much more mature, that task length is much higher. It's like 12, 13 hours or
Well,
something
you can
like
also,
that.
there are advantages with coding where you can test it and see whether it's worked. So who's getting the most out of this at PwC and at the companies you see? Is it the top level employees who are like high performers? They've always been high performers. Is it the entry level people? Is it folks in the middle? Is it actually the worst performers? They're doing the best because they have access to the same models as everybody else. Who's gaining?
I think the benefits are available to everybody, but it is interesting that across industries,
Yep.
what we see is, and this is different than the early speculation or the early observations either. The best talent gets the most from AI, and so it makes sense. But I was just talking to a musician, and he was saying that the best talent sees things in the AI music making process that the average talent doesn't. We see that in coding. The best engineering talent is able to do the most
Mm-hmm.
with these platforms. Everybody has the same access to the same capability, but the best coding engineer gets the most value from that platform.
I guess you took all the piano players in the world and you gave them, the most beautiful piano to play on. The best players would get the most out of it. They would figure out what you can really get from this particular Steinway or whatever it is. Yeah, I think that makes sense. We'll be back in a minute with more from Dan Priest.
AI, literally.
Exactly. And AI.
Got it?
Everyone has an opinion on AI, but are any of them right for your enterprise?
AI.
Cut through the AI noise with AI solutions from PwC, so you can solve the business problems that matter most. PwC.
One of the big debates, of course, in economics and AI is hiring young people. Is PwC hiring more first-year associates than it did 2 years ago?
It depends on the part of the business. And so we hire based on the needs and the growth of the business. And we continue to hire at very high rates. And net, we've increased hiring, I think, by 5,000 people.
5,000?
Yeah.
Do you look for different skills? Like, obviously, you're going to look for people who are enthusiastic about AI and skilled in AI. Do you look for people who are like, when you're hiring first-year associates, do you like give them tests on how to manage agents?
We do test on different platforms, different languages. It's interesting because of what you and I were talking about before, where coding has been democratized to some degree, and so you have some non-traditional coders showing up in engineering roles because they were able to get into that space through the code generators, but then they became really good data scientists, or they became really good testers, or they became really good even coders, right? We've seen some examples of people just becoming an important part of the application development process, and so we test for those things during the interview process.
Do you have a hypothesis on what comes after agents? When we talked 18 months ago, we were like, the agentic future is coming, and here it is, right? We're in it. What's next?
My prediction is then you'll have agentic applications.
What's an
So
agentic application?
think about if in a finance function,
Yep.
I don't need thousands of agents.
Right.
I probably need 10 to 15 really good
Mhm.
agents, right? And those agents do things like planning and forecasting, AR, AP, transaction processing. Some help you with the close, some help you with reporting and analytics, right? And you're going to end up with a small number of authoritative expert agents. And then you're going to find that those agents work best. They work best when they're working with each other and you're managing the horizontal, the way work flows. You're like, okay, well, let's just start to bundle those agents. And it starts to look very much like an application at that point, but it's an intelligent application.
Do you think there's a market in there, right? Like, could I I'm going to create like a finance suite of agents. I'm going to call my new company CFO. And it's going to have 12 different kind of agents with different kind of skills that I'll build in, and I'll train them, and I'll post-train them in instruments. Is there money to be made there?
I think the application vendors whose traditional footprint is getting squeezed right now will be really good at creating those agentic applications. I think companies will look in that agentic layer and think what what aspects of these agents are really proprietary and potentially differentiating for us, and we don't want them going into a user community. We want them in our proprietary stack, and so they will be building some of those capabilities. And it'll be harder for probably that small company that specializes in a very narrow niche to be successful.
Who's going to end up getting the value from this future business, right? Is it like the foundation models, which have like kind of captured a lot of the value so far? Is it going to be like the big time? It's going to be like the sales forces, right? That are going to know exactly what you need for that particular suite, and they'll build agents. Will it be a little startup over here that kind of can maneuver around Salesforce because there's this new opportunity and build agents? Or will it just be the companies themselves that can take their intelligence and build their internal tools?
The large language models, I keep evolving my thinking on what they're capable
Yeah.
of doing. I do think that the specialty models, or the small language models, where you have a proprietary data set that nobody else has, and it can inform a specialized model, or it can be the underpinning of a specialized
Yeah.
model. There are some examples like that out there.
Yeah.
And so, in the creative space, music making, movie making, you already see examples where there's some really interesting product being built on those large language models. I would have thought that that would be the domain of the specialized models. And then you get into licensing, like I do think the cool thing about the small language models is that there are some of them out there doing a great job of doing it responsibly, where the rights holders get compensated for the use of their content, and the model's underpinned, with that licensed content. And so it's better, more specialized data, but it's also creating a revenue stream for the rights holders.
That's music to my ears as a guy who runs a company that owns a bunch of rights and has complex views about all those big AI companies
That's
that
right.
came
You're
and
a
took it in the
musician,
middle of the
yeah.
night. Well, a musician and running the Atlantic, right? Like as someone who's written books, made albums, runs a media company, it is really weird and feels strange to know that all of that stuff was snarfed up by these
Yeah,
companies that are building competitive products.
right.
It's a very strange feeling. And so I do hope that over time, rights holders are compensated much more than they have been. Dan, we put an hourglass on the table here. Will you explain why we have an hourglass here?
Well, it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier that in the past talked about labor pyramids, and about 20, 30 years ago we started talking about how the shape of the organization would change because of outsourcing, labor
Yeah,
arbitrage. And we said it was going to go to a diamond, and it never fully ended up as a diamond. Now with AI, the diamond's back,
yeah.
and they're saying, maybe we can get that to that diamond, and we don't need all these junior resources. That was the first reaction. Now, what's being discussed in a lot of C suites is an hourglass, which is,
So this is middle management right there in the middle,
yeah, maybe
totally
not that narrow.
vaporized.
That seems pretty narrow. But the idea is,
Just so the viewers can see. So this is the C-suite, which is now gigantic and over promoted. Middle management and then new employees. That's where we're headed.
this is a,
I was
a,
told, by the way, I couldn't flip this over, so I feel like I need to flip this over and see what happens.
Okay. It does work. That's how long I have to give you my answer. Yeah, so these are abstract concepts, not to take literally. It probably won't look exactly like that hourglass, but at the conceptual level, it means bring more early career workers in.
Yep.
Give middle management. By the way, if you've ever done a transformation, middle management is really hard to change,
Yeah.
right? Give middle management these tools, give middle management these resources, and give them the incentive and the ability to get up the
Well,
management
explain how
chain.
that works, right? So if you're at the top of the bottom half of the hourglass and you want to get to the bottom of the top half of the hourglass, how do you do that?
Performance, right? Change in performance. So if we're living in a day and age that has to change, we got to speed up innovation. We got to accelerate outcomes. Middle management has direct control over the factors of production, right? And so reward them when they change, and reward them when they start taking advantage of these powerful new capabilities, and grow the number of leadership roles for them to mature into. And it becomes a little bit of an upper on model, right? Like, perform and move up.
Yeah.
Don't move on.
Last question I ask all the guests. If you had an unlimited budget to spend on anything you wanted in AI for any purpose in the world, what would you spend it on?
I would invest a lot in getting leaders talking about AI differently. I do think we need to shift the narrative about the power of AI and what it means to our economic future and prosperity for many people. And so I think people can be afraid about the future. There can be fear about that future, and that future can still be good. And
Right.
it's up to the leader to cross that chasm.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do. Like, there's a lot that's just head spinning about AI, and there's stuff that's terrifying, and there's stuff that's so confusing. But I'm actually quite optimistic about where we're going.
I am too, and it needs CEOs creating clarity, right? Like fear needs to be understood It needs to be managed, but it shouldn't stop progress and it shouldn't determine our path. And great leaders motivate people to do things that they might be uncomfortable doing otherwise, right? And that we need a lot more of that great leadership right
that are
now.
uncomfortable doing, but are good for everybody involved.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan Priest. Thank you for joining the most interesting thing in AI.
Loved it. Thanks, Nick.
That was my conversation with Dan Priest. I'm still thinking about the issue. If AI is like the light bulb and electricity, then with time we should see it change a lot of the entire world. So I'd love to know, how would you like to be using AI in 5 years or in 10 years? Let us know in the comments. I'll respond to lots of them. And be sure to subscribe to this channel for more.